There are moments that split a life in two, a before and an after. Mine happened on Christmas morning in a room glittering with lights and laughter, surrounded by family who had forgotten my son existed. 36 gifts. That's how many presents my mother bought for my sister's children. iPads, drones, designer clothes, robotics kits, mountains of bright paper and shrieking joy piled around Emma, Tyler, and little Lily like offerings to tiny gods. And my son Theo? He sat beside me on the carpet, 7 years old, hands tucked into his sleeves, making himself as small as possible. Every time a new gift was announced, he leaned forward, just a little, hope flickering across his face like a candle running out of wax. And every time the name on the tag wasn't his. 0 gifts, not one. I watched my son learn in real time that he didn't matter, and something inside me cracked clean in half. But here's the thing about broken things. Sometimes they become sharper. Sometimes they become weapons. This is the story of how I walked out of my mother's house that Christmas morning and never looked back. How I rewrote my will, fought a court battle, and rebuilt my entire life around one simple truth. Family isn't who you're born to. Family is who shows up. And if my own mother couldn't remember my son existed, then I would make sure she remembered the day she lost us both. I told myself this year would be different. I whispered it like a prayer as I drove up the winding mountain road toward Silverwood, Colorado, watching snowflakes drift lazily onto the windshield. The wipers pushed them aside in slow, rhythmic strokes, and beside me, the heating vents hummed a soft, mechanical lullaby. In the rear-view mirror, I could see Theo in his booster seat, clutching his worn stuffed bear, the one he'd named Captain Cosmos when he was 4. His face was pressed close to the window, breath fogging the glass as he watched the snow-covered pines blur past. "Mom?" His voice was small, tentative. "Yeah, buddy?" "Does Grandma like me?" The question hit me somewhere below my ribs. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles whitening, and forced my voice to stay even. "Of course she does, sweetheart. Why would you ask that?" He shrugged, that careful, practiced shrug children use when they already know the answer but hope they're wrong. "I don't know. She just looks at Emma and Tyler and Lily different, like they're special." I swallowed hard. "You're special too, Theo." "I know," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. He went back to watching the snow, his small fingers stroking Captain Cosmos's matted fur. This year would be different, I told myself again. Maybe she's changed, maybe this time. But even as I thought it, a memory surfaced unbidden. Me, 12 years old, sitting in this same position, watching my older sister Danielle tear through a mountain of gifts while I held a single thin package in my lap. A scarf. Purple, scratchy, clearly purchased at the last minute from a gas station clearance bin. "Your sister's been through so much," my mother had said when I'd looked up at her, eyes burning with questions I was too young to articulate. "She needs a little extra love right now." Danielle had been sick when she was 5, a serious illness that had required surgery and months of recovery. I wasn't even born yet. But somehow, 20 years later, that illness still justified everything. The extra gifts, the extra attention, the extra love that always seemed to run out before it reached me. I'd spent my entire childhood being told I was loved equally while watching evidence to the contrary pile up year after year. And now, watching my son ask the same questions I'd asked at his age, I felt something tighten in my chest, a wire pulled taut, vibrating with the weight of decades. This year would be different. It had to be. We arrived at my mother's house at 9:47 a.m. The Victorian sat on a gentle slope overlooking the town, its wraparound porch strung with lights that glittered even in the pale morning sun. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the smell of cinnamon and pine hit me the moment I opened the car door. Picture perfect, like something from a holiday movie. Theo unbuckled himself and slid out, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. He clutched Captain Cosmos in one hand and reached for mine with the other. His fingers were cold. He'd forgotten his gloves again, and I squeezed them gently, trying to transfer some warmth. "Ready?" I asked. He nodded, but his grip tightened. The front door swung open before we reached the porch, and there was my mother. Patricia Brooks, 64 years old, perfectly coiffed silver hair, wearing a cream cashmere sweater and pearl earrings. She looked like a magazine advertisement for gracious holiday living. "They're here," she announced to no one in particular, her voice bright and theatrical. Then she swept past me entirely and crouched down in front of Theo. "Hello, sweetheart. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Grandma," Theo said politely. She patted his head twice, the way you might pat a neighbor's dog, then straightened and turned back toward the house. Come in, come in. Danielle and the kids are already in the living room. They've been waiting." No hug for me. No, "Merry Christmas, Elena." Not even eye contact. I told myself it didn't matter. I was 32 years old. I didn't need my mother's approval anymore. But some wounds never fully heal. They just scab over, waiting to be torn open again. The living room looked like a toy store had exploded. Wrapping paper covered every surface. Ribbons curled across the hardwood floor like colorful snakes. And in the middle of it all, arranged around a massive Christmas tree, sat my sister Danielle's 3 children, Emma, 10, Tyler, 8, and Lily, 5, surrounded by more gifts than I could count. Danielle herself was perched on the velvet sofa, sipping from a mug that probably contained more Irish cream than coffee. Her husband Kevin stood behind her, phone raised, recording the chaos like a proud documentarian. "Elena," Danielle called, not bothering to get up. "You made it. We were starting to wonder." "Traffic was slow," I said. "The snow—" "Well, you're here now. Find a spot. Mom's about to do the big reveal." I looked around for a place to sit, but every chair was occupied or covered in discarded wrapping paper. Theo and I ended up on the floor near the edge of the room, our backs against the wall. From here, I had a perfect view of everything, and what I saw made my stomach turn. The gifts around Emma, Tyler, and Lily weren't just plentiful, they were extravagant. I watched Emma tear into a box containing the latest iPad Pro. Tyler whooped over a professional-grade drone, the kind that costs more than my monthly car payment. Lily clutched a limited edition American Girl doll, her face lit up like the star on top of the tree. And the gifts kept coming. A mountain bike with neon spokes, a robotics kit that could teach a child to program, VR goggles, designer sneakers, a karaoke machine, Lego sets taller than Lily herself. My mother floated between them, phone in hand, capturing every gasp and squeal. "Tyler, honey, hold it up! Yes, just like that. Perfect! Emma, show Grandma your face. Oh, how precious!" She took 23 photos of Danielle's children opening presents. I counted. She didn't take a single one of Theo. Theo sat beside me, legs folded beneath him, hands buried in his sleeves. He was so still, so quiet, that anyone glancing over might have thought he was simply watching, content to be a spectator. But I could see the details no one else bothered to notice. The way his fingers clenched and unclenched inside his sweater, knuckles pressing against the fabric. The way he leaned forward each time a new gift was announced, just a fraction of an inch, hope flickering in his eyes, then settled back when the name on the tag belonged to someone else. The way his smile grew tighter with each passing minute, like he was practicing bravery he shouldn't have to know yet. I scanned the tree again, checking every tag I could see from my position on the floor. Emma, Tyler, Lily, Danielle, Kevin, the names repeated in an endless loop. Not once did I see the name Theo. "Open the big one next, Mason," my mother exclaimed. Then she caught herself laughing. "I mean, Tyler, open the big one, Tyler." She'd called him the wrong name, mixing him up with one of Danielle's friends' kids, but nobody seemed to notice or care. Everyone laughed along, and Tyler dove into the enormous silver box with the fat red bow. More gifts, more squeals, more photographs. 32 presents, 33, 34. Theo stopped leaning forward. He just watched, his face carefully blank, Captain Cosmos clutched tight against his chest. 35, 36. The last gift was a tablet with a shimmering case presented to Emma with the kind of fanfare usually reserved for Oscar winners. The room erupted in applause and happy chaos. And Theo whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear, "Did she forget me, Mom?" The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. I turned to look at him. Really, look at him. And what I saw broke something inside me that I hadn't even known was intact. His eyes were glassy but not quite wet, holding back tears through sheer force of 7-year-old willpower. His lower lip trembled almost imperceptibly. His small hands gripped Captain Cosmos so tightly that the stuffed bear's seams strained. He wasn't throwing a tantrum. He wasn't demanding attention. He was just accepting that he didn't matter enough to be remembered. That was the worst part. Not anger, not protest, just quiet, devastating acceptance. From across the room, I heard Danielle lean toward Kevin, her voice pitched low but not low enough. "Told you Elena would get dramatic if Theo didn't get something big." Kevin smirked. They'd noticed. They'd known. And they'd done nothing except prepare their mockery in advance. My mother straightened up, brushing glitter from her sleeves with the satisfied air of someone who had completed a noble duty. "All right, everyone. Breakfast in 30 minutes. I've got quiche in the oven and—" "Mom." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Did you get something for Theo?" The room went quiet. My mother's expression flickered. Surprise, then irritation, then something that looked almost like annoyance at being caught. "Oh, honey, I must have left it in the other room. I'll grab it later." "Which other room?" "Elena." Her tone sharpened. "Don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene. I'm asking a simple question. Where is my son's gift?" Silence stretched between us, thin and brittle as ice. Danielle exchanged a look with Kevin. The children had stopped playing with their new toys, sensing the shift in atmosphere. My mother's face hardened. "I'll buy him something tomorrow. Kids don't remember presents anyway. They forget in a week." Kids don't remember presents. But Theo would remember this. I could see it in his eyes, the way this moment was etching itself into his memory, becoming part of the story he'd tell himself about his worth, his place in this family, his lovability. I looked at my son, his small shoulders hunched, his hands still clenched inside his sleeves, his face still trying so desperately hard to be brave, and something inside me cracked clean in half. Then it reassembled into something harder, something sharper, something that would never break again. "Theo," I said softly, "go get your jacket." My mother's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine, confusion, irritation, disbelief, before settling on offended incredulity. "Excuse me? Theo." I kept my voice gentle, though my heart was hammering. "Get your jacket, sweetheart. We're leaving." He blinked up at me, uncertain. "Now?" "Now." Danielle twisted around on the sofa, her perfectly microbladed eyebrows arching toward her hairline. "What are you doing, Elena? We just got started. Mom's making brunch." I didn't answer her. I stood up, brushed carpet lint from my jeans, and walked to where Theo's jacket hung by the door. My hands were steady as I helped him into it, though inside I felt like a tuning fork struck against stone, vibrating with something too big to name. His fingers trembled slightly as I zipped up his coat. Not from cold. From confusion. From the emotional whiplash of the morning. From trying so hard to understand what was happening. I smoothed the fabric over his chest, and he leaned into the motion, letting me steady him. "Elena." My mother's heels clicked sharply on the hardwood as she followed us to the door. "For heaven's sake, you're being ridiculous! I said I'd buy him something tomorrow." I didn't turn around. "Nora, Elena, stop this nonsense right now. You're making a scene in front of the children." I took Theo's hand and reached for the door handle. "Don't be so dramatic. It was an honest mistake. These things happen." The door opened. Cold winter air hit my face, clean and sharp, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not from the cold, from the sudden, overwhelming clarity of what I was doing. 32 years of swallowed protests. 32 years of "Danielle needs more," of "don't be so sensitive," of watching my sister receive everything while I learned to make myself small enough to survive on scraps of attention. And now I was watching my son learn the same lessons. No more. I stepped onto the porch, Theo's small hand warm in mine. Snow drifted from the gray sky, settling on his hood, on my shoulders, on the perfectly manicured porch railing. Elena Mitchell, if you walk out that door, don't expect me to chase after you. I turned then, not in anger. I was beyond anger. I had passed through it into something quieter and more permanent. My mother stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself against the cold, face flushed with indignation. Behind her, I could see Danielle still on the sofa, Kevin still filming, the children frozen mid-play like characters in a paused movie. "We're going home, Mom," I said. Over a gift? Over one little oversight? It wasn't an oversight. My voice was calm, almost gentle. It was a choice. The same choice you've been making my entire life, but you don't get to make it with my son. Her mouth opened, then closed. For just a second, something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or the ghost of shame, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the defensive armor she'd worn for as long as I could remember. "You're being ungrateful, after everything I've done for you. Goodbye, Mom." I shut the door before she could say anything else. The world outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels honest. No music, no laughter, no performances. Just snow falling softly, muffling everything, turning the world into a hushed white sanctuary. Theo squeezed my hand as we walked across the icy porch toward the car. His small boots crunched in the snow, leaving tiny footprints that were already beginning to fill in. I opened his door, helped him climb into his booster seat, buckled him in. He looked up at me through big, searching eyes, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "Mom," he finally whispered, "did I do something wrong?" My heart cracked along fault lines I didn't know existed. I crouched down so we were eye level, took his small face in my hands, and said the words I wished someone had said to me 30 years ago. "You didn't do anything wrong, Theo. Not a single thing. What happened in there?" I gestured vaguely toward the house. "That's not about you. It was never about you. Do you understand?" He didn't answer right away. He was 7, processing something that most adults struggle to articulate. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Are you mad at Grandma?" I thought about it. Was I mad? The word felt too small, too simple for the tangle of emotions churning inside me. Anger was there. Yes. But also grief. Also relief. Also something that felt terrifyingly like freedom. "I'm sad," I said finally. "Sad that she doesn't know how to love people the right way. But I'm not going to let her sadness hurt you. Okay?" "Okay." I kissed his forehead, closed his door, and walked around to the driver's side. As I slid behind the wheel, I caught one last glimpse of my mother's house in the rearview mirror. The twinkling lights, the wreath on the door, the picture-perfect facade hiding something rotten at its core. I started the engine and pulled away without looking back. We didn't speak for most of the drive home. The windshield wipers moved in slow, hypnotic strokes, pushing snow aside with a soft shush-shush rhythm. The heater hummed, the road unwound ahead of us like a gray ribbon through a white world. Theo pressed his forehead against the window, watching the pine trees blur past. He wasn't crying. He wasn't asking questions. He was just quiet. The kind of quiet that worried me more than tears would have. When a child goes completely still, that's when you know something inside them has been bent in a way that won't easily straighten. We pulled into our driveway just before noon. The house looked small and cold compared to my mother's Victorian showpiece, a modest 2-story with beige siding and a struggling juniper bush out front. But it was ours, and right now, that was enough. Theo unbuckled himself and walked inside ahead of me. No running, no excitement, just the soft sound of his socks on the floor as he made his way down the hall. He closed his bedroom door behind him with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than a slam. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, keys still in my hand, unsure what to do with myself. The house felt hollow. Wrong. This wasn't how Christmas was supposed to feel when you had a 7-year-old. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the kettle. Tea. Maybe tea would help. I filled it, set it on the stove, turned on the burner. Then something inside me snapped. Not dramatically. No screaming, no throwing things. Just a clean, precise click, like a lock finally sliding into place. A decision made. I turned off the burner, walked to my small home office, and sat down in front of my laptop. The folder was labeled Estate Planning. I hadn't opened it in 6 months. When I'd first created it, I'd been methodical, responsible, the good daughter making sensible arrangements for my son's future. I'd listed my mother as primary beneficiary of my life insurance, Danielle as contingent, their children as secondary distribution. Back then, it had seemed obvious. Family takes care of family. Blood is thicker than water. All those phrases we repeat without examining, like mantras that lose their meaning through mindless repetition. I stared at the screen until my jaw stopped trembling. Then I began to type. Effective immediately, I am removing Patricia Brooks and Danielle Brooks Walker as beneficiaries from all accounts and policies under my name. The words appeared on the screen, stark and irreversible. I kept typing. Primary beneficiary, Theodore James Mitchell, 80%. Secondary beneficiary, Silverwood Children's Foundation, 20%, a clean split. A future that didn't include anyone who had taught my son he was forgettable. Some might call this impulsive, dramatic, an overreaction to one little oversight. But they didn't understand. This wasn't impulse. This was the culmination of 32 years. Every forgotten birthday, every comparison that left me wanting, every time I'd been told that Danielle needed more, deserved more, was simply more. This was the end of waiting for people to change who had never shown any interest in changing. I signed digitally, dated it, December 25th, sent it to my attorney with the subject line, Urgent Update, Beneficiary Changes. A confirmation pinged almost immediately. My attorney's auto-reply, promising to process the request first thing after the holiday. The kettle began to whistle from the kitchen, shrill and insistent. I didn't move to turn it off. My phone lit up on the desk beside me. Incoming call. Dad. I stared at the screen for 4 rings before answering. Hey, sweetheart, my father said. No Merry Christmas. No, how's Theo? He dove straight into what he wanted. Listen, my transmission's dying. Shop quoted me $3,200 to fix it. Any chance you could spot me till next month? I closed my eyes. Raymond Brooks had been borrowing money from me for 5 years. Car repairs, medical bills, rent that somehow always came up short. Unexpected emergencies that weren't unexpected at all. Every time the same promise. I'll pay you back. Not once had a dollar returned to me. No, I said. Silence on the other end. Then a scoff. What do you mean, no? I mean, no. I can't help anymore, Dad. Is this about this morning? Your mother called me, said you stormed out over some gift thing. You're blowing this way out of proportion, Elena. I'm done. The words came out flat, final. Done paying to be everyone's backup plan while my son gets treated like he doesn't matter. Done being the responsible one who holds everything together while everyone else takes and takes. Kids forget presents in a week, he said, the exact same phrase my mother had used. You're overreacting. I hung up before he could say anything else. The kettle shrieked louder, loud enough to make the walls vibrate. I walked to the kitchen, turned it off, and just stood there, hands braced against the counter. By 6 that evening, my phone showed 47 missed calls and 30 unread text messages. Mom, Danielle, Dad, Kevin, even numbers I didn't recognize, probably relatives who'd been given a carefully edited version of the morning's events. I didn't read a single message. I didn't listen to a single voicemail. Instead, I walked down the hallway to Theo's room. His door was cracked open slightly. I pushed it gently and found him sitting cross-legged on the floor, coloring a picture of a superhero. Cape, mask, bold primary colors. He worked with careful concentration, staying precisely inside the lines. Hey, buddy, I said softly. He didn't look up right away, but when he did, his eyes were calm. Too calm. Are we going back to Grandma's? He asked. No, not for a while. He nodded, not relieved, not upset. just accepting, as if he'd already known the answer. He went back to coloring, his crayon moving in slow, deliberate strokes. I watched him for a long moment, feeling both proud and devastated. Proud of his resilience, devastated that he needed to be resilient at all. When he finished the page, he held it up. "Do you like it?" The superhero had brown hair like Theo's and wore a blue cape covered in stars. In the corner of the page, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, he'd written, "Captain Cosmos, protector of moms." My throat tightened. "It's perfect," I whispered. He smiled, just a little, and put the drawing aside. Then he crawled onto his bed and pulled his blanket up to his chin, eyes drifting toward the window. "Merry Christmas, Theo," I said. "Merry Christmas, Mom." I sat beside him, brushing his hair back, watching the last light of the day fade outside his window. When his breathing slowed and he slipped into sleep, I stayed there, keeping vigil. The house was silent around us, but for the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like a door closing, a choice being made, a line that should have been drawn years ago. The first text from Danielle arrived at 7:42 a.m. the next morning. "You really embarrassed yourself yesterday. Mom is devastated. Call her." I read it once, then set my phone face down on the kitchen counter. Theo was still asleep. The clock on the microwave showed 7:43, early for a day with no school, and the house had that fragile morning stillness that I didn't want to break. By 8:15, my phone had buzzed 17 more times. "This is ridiculous. You're hurting Mom over nothing. Kevin says you're being emotionally manipulative. Call me back. Dad says you won't lend him money now too? What is wrong with you? You're tearing this family apart." I made myself a cup of coffee and didn't respond to any of them. At 8:47, the doorbell rang. Theo appeared in the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, Captain Cosmos dangling from one hand. "Who is it?" "Stay here, sweetheart. I'll check." Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing on the porch, gripping a bright red gift bag like it might explode if she let go. Her hair wasn't done. Her lipstick was smudged. She wore slippers under her winter coat, and her robe peeked out beneath the hem. She looked frantic, raw, nothing like the composed woman who had hosted yesterday's perfect holiday performance. She knocked again, harder. "Elena, I know you're in there. Open up." I stepped back from the door. "Elena, this is ridiculous. We need to talk about yesterday. Open the door." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there, silent, waiting. After a full minute, she let out a long, theatrical sigh, the kind she always used when she wanted witnesses to her victimhood. "Fine," she said, loud enough to carry through the door. "I'll leave this here, but we need to talk, Elena. This isn't over." She set the red gift bag on the welcome mat, straightened her coat, and walked back to her car without looking back. I watched through the window as she drove away, her tires spinning slightly in the snow. Only when her car disappeared around the corner did I open the door. The gift bag sat alone on the step, its glossy surface catching the pale morning light. Red tissue paper poked out the top, bright and loud against the white snow. I picked it up and carried it inside. Theo had settled at the kitchen table, chin propped on his hands, watching me with quiet curiosity. "Was that Grandma?" "Yes." "What did she want?" I set the bag on the counter and looked inside. 3 items. A navy hoodie at least 2 sizes too big, a stuffed bear that still smelled of factory plastic, and a small toy car with a price sticker still attached. At the bottom, a crumpled receipt. I smoothed it between my fingers. Purchased, December 26th, 8:19 a.m. Not a real apology, just panic, just shame, wrapped in tissue paper and presented as if it meant something. Theo slid off his chair and came to stand beside me. He peered into the bag, expression unreadable. "Did she buy those for me?" "Yes, this morning." He reached in and touched the stuffed bear, running his fingers over its synthetic fur. Then he pulled his hand back, like he'd touched something that burned. "Do you want to keep them?" I asked softly. He shook his head. No hesitation. No second guessing. "No." I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. He'd already lived the answer. After breakfast, we drove across town to the Good Neighbors Donation Center. The building was small and cheerful, with hand-painted murals on the walls and a collection bin shaped like a giant wrapped present. Theo carried the red gift bag in his lap the whole way, staring down at it like it was something fragile and sad. Inside, a volunteer with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair greeted us. "Holiday donations?" I nodded. "Something like that." Theo stepped forward and placed the bag on the counter. He stood very straight, his small shoulders squared, and said, "I hope another kid likes it." The woman's expression softened. "I'm sure they will, sweetheart. That's very generous of you." Back in the car, Theo buckled himself in, then looked at me with an expression far too old for 7. "Mom?" "Yeah, buddy?" "Grandma didn't forget to buy me a present yesterday, did she? She just didn't think I mattered enough." The words hit like a physical blow. I had to grip the steering wheel to keep my hands from shaking. "The way Grandma treats people," I said carefully, "says everything about Grandma. It doesn't say anything about you. You matter, Theo. You matter more than all the presents in the world." He considered this for a moment, his young mind working through complexities most adults never master. "Is that why we're not going back?" "Yes, that's exactly why." He nodded slowly, then reached down to pick up Captain Cosmos from the floor of the car. He held the stuffed bear close, pressing his cheek against its worn fur. "I think that's the right choice," he said quietly. On the drive home, we passed Grace Thornton standing at the end of her driveway, wrapped in a knitted hat and puffy coat, leaning on her cane. She'd lived on our street for 40 years, babysat half the kids in the neighborhood, baked cookies for every holiday. She waved when she saw our car. I pulled over and rolled down my window. "Morning, Mrs. Thornton. Everything okay?" She studied me with eyes that had seen too much life to miss anything. "I saw your mother's car here earlier. She didn't stay long." "No, she didn't." Grace nodded slowly. "I remember when you were Theo's age, Elena. Your mother favored Danielle even then. You never asked for much, but you rarely got it. I've always wondered how that shaped you." The observation hit hard, honest and unexpected, like stepping into bright light after years in shadow. "I'm sorry," she continued softly. "Some patterns go on so long people forget they're doing harm." From the back seat, Theo tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, I'm cold." "I know, sweetheart, we're going inside." I turned back to Grace. "Thank you. Really." She stepped closer to the window and lowered her voice. "If you ever need a witness, someone to speak to what I've seen over the years, don't hesitate to ask." The offer caught me off guard. A small, unexpected kindness in the middle of a day I'd thought would be nothing but cleanup. "I'll remember that," I said. "Thank you." She nodded once, then shuffled back toward her house. Inside, the house felt different. Warmer somehow, though I hadn't touched the thermostat. I hung up Theo's coat, then my own, and stood in the entryway for a moment, taking stock. My phone buzzed from the kitchen counter. I didn't want to look, but some instinct made me check. 3 new messages from Danielle. The last one read, "If you don't explain yourself soon, we're going to take this further. Don't say we didn't warn you." I stared at the words, feeling the threat coiled beneath their false concern. Theo had curled up on the couch with his drawing supplies, humming softly to himself as he started a new picture. This one of a rocket ship streaking toward a cluster of stars. His face was peaceful, focused. Whatever storms were gathering on the horizon, they hadn't reached him yet. I set my phone face down on the counter and walked into the living room, sat down beside my son, watched him draw constellations with his steady little strokes. The world outside could rage all it wanted. My family could threaten and manipulate and spin whatever stories they needed to cast themselves as victims. But inside this house, I was building something different, something safe, something real. And I was done apologizing for it. January, April. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday in mid-January, 3 weeks after Christmas. I found it tucked between a credit card statement and a grocery store flyer. A pale pink envelope with my mother's looping handwriting curling across the front like decorative vines. The kind of stationery she kept in her writing desk for special correspondence, as she called it. Birthday cards to distant cousins. Thank you notes to dinner party hosts. guilt trips to daughters who had finally stopped playing their assigned roles. I stood at the mailbox for a long moment, snow seeping into my boots, staring at my name written in her careful script. Elena Mitchell, not Elena Brooks. She'd used my married name, my ex-husband's name that I'd kept after the divorce because changing it felt like too much paperwork. A small detail, but telling. Even in her handwriting, she was reminding me that I had left the family, that I was an outsider now. I carried the letter inside but didn't open it until after Theo was in bed. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock above the stove. I sat at the kitchen table, turned the envelope over in my hands, and finally slid my finger under the flap. Her perfume rose from the paper, floral and sharp, instantly transporting me back to childhood, to standing in doorways, waiting to be noticed, to watching my sister receive praise for achievements I'd matched or exceeded, to learning, year after year, that love in our family was a finite resource, and I was always last in line. I unfolded the letter. My dearest Elena, I've been thinking about you constantly since Christmas. I can't sleep, I can't eat. Your father says I'm making myself sick with worry, and he's right, but how can a mother rest when her child is in pain? I know you're upset about the gifts. I understand, but sweetheart, you have to see this from my perspective. Children don't remember these things. Theo won't recall whether he got one present or 30. What he'll remember is whether his family was together, whether there was love in the room. And there was love, Elena. There's always been love. I don't know why you can't see that. Please call me. Let's talk about this like adults. I'm sure we can work through this misunderstanding if you'll just give me a chance to explain. All my love, Mom. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully, slid it back into its envelope, and placed it in the manila folder I'd started keeping in my desk drawer. I didn't respond. The second letter came a week later. The tone had shifted. Less pleading, more defensive. Elena, I don't understand your silence. After everything I've done for you over the years, you can't even pick up the phone? Danielle says you've blocked her number. Your father says you hung up on him. Is this really how you want to treat your family? I made one mistake. One. And yes, maybe I should have been more careful about the gifts, but you're acting like I committed some unforgivable crime. Theo is 7 years old. He doesn't need expensive presents. He needs stability, consistency, a family that stays together. You're the one tearing us apart, Elena, not me. I hope you can see that before it's too late. Mom. Into the folder it went. The third letter arrived in early February, and this one made me stop breathing. Elena, since you refused to speak to me, I suppose I'll have to say this in writing. You don't understand what it was like when Danielle was sick. You weren't born yet. You didn't see her in that hospital bed. So small, so fragile, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred like mechanical heartbeats. You didn't sit in the waiting room for 9 hours while surgeons cut into your 5-year-old daughter's chest. I thought I was going to lose her, Elena. Every day for 3 months, I woke up not knowing if my child would survive to see the next morning. Do you have any idea what that does to a mother, how it changes you? When you were born 2 years later, I was still recovering, still terrified, still watching Danielle for any sign that the illness might return. Maybe I didn't give you as much attention as I should have. Maybe I leaned too heavily on Danielle, made her feel too special, because every moment with her felt like borrowed time. But that doesn't mean I didn't love you. It doesn't mean I don't love Theo. You're twisting everything into something ugly, and I don't know how to make you see the truth. I was scared, Elena. I'm still scared, and now I'm losing you too, and I don't know how to stop it. Please, call me. Mom. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after reading that letter, my coffee growing cold beside me. For the first time in my life, I understood why. Not excuses, explanations. The shape of my mother's fear, the way it had calcified over decades into something that looked like favoritism, but was really just trauma wearing a different mask. She had loved Danielle with the desperate intensity of someone who had almost lost her, and that love had left no room for anything else, including me. I thought about my own childhood, the times I'd been sick and my mother had barely looked up from whatever she was doing for Danielle. You're not as sick as your sister was, she'd say, as if illness were a competition I was failing to win. The birthdays that felt like afterthoughts. The graduations she attended but didn't celebrate. The steady, persistent message that I was loved. Yes, but loved less. Loved second. Loved with whatever scraps of attention remained after Danielle had taken her fill. Understanding didn't make it hurt less. If anything, it made it worse, because now I could see that my mother had known, on some level, exactly what she was doing. She'd just convinced herself it was justified, and she was still doing it. Still prioritizing Danielle's children over mine. Still expecting me to accept less because that was the role I'd been assigned before I was even born. I folded the letter carefully. My hands were trembling, but my mind was clear. Understanding wasn't forgiveness. Explanation wasn't excuse. And the fact that my mother's damage had roots didn't mean I had to let those roots wrap around my son. Into the folder it went. The letters kept coming through February and into March. Some were pleading, some were angry. Some tried manipulation tactics so transparent they would have been funny if they hadn't been so sad. Everyone in the family thinks you're being unreasonable. Aunt Linda says she's never seen me so upset. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of the stress you're causing. Danielle's children keep asking why they can't see Theo. How do you explain to a child that their aunt has decided to punish the whole family? And then, in late March, the tone shifted to something darker. If you continue down this path, Elena, you'll force me to make choices I don't want to make. A grandmother has rights. I've spoken to a lawyer, and there are options available to me that I'd rather not pursue, but I will if you leave me no choice. This is your last warning, Mom. I read that letter 3 times, parsing each sentence for meaning. A grandmother has rights. The phrase echoed in my mind, cold and clinical. She wasn't asking for reconciliation anymore. She was threatening legal action. The folder in my desk was getting thick. Letters, screenshots of text messages, voicemails I'd saved but not listened to. Documentation. Evidence. A paper trail of manipulation that stretched back months. I hadn't known why I was saving everything. Some instinct, maybe. Some quiet voice whispering that I might need proof someday. Now I understood. The war I'd thought was ending had only been finding its footing, and my mother had just declared her opening move. The explosion came on a Thursday afternoon in late February. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner when I heard the front door slam hard enough to rattle the windows. Footsteps pounded down the hallway, too fast, too heavy, and then Theo appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face flushed red, his backpack dangling from one clenched fist. "Theo, what's wrong?" He threw the backpack onto the floor. It hit the tile with a heavy thud, papers spilling from the unzipped pocket. "Why won't you let me see Grandma?" The question hit me like a slap. I set down the knife carefully, buying myself a moment to respond. "Sweetheart, we talked about this." "Emma said I'm a bad kid." His voice cracked, hovering somewhere between fury and tears. "She said Grandma cries every day because of me. She said I ruined Christmas and I'm ruining the whole family and—" "Theo, you ruined everything!" He was shouting now, his small body trembling with rage. "You made Grandma sad. You took me away and now everyone hates us." Something cracked inside my chest. I reached for him, but he jerked back, putting the kitchen island between us like a barrier. "Theo, listen to me." "No, I don't want to listen. I want to see Grandma. I want things to go back to normal." "They can't go back to normal, sweetheart. Not the way things were." "Why not?" His face crumpled, anger dissolving into something rawer. "Why can't we just pretend everything's okay? Why do you have to make everything so hard?" And there it was, the question I'd been dreading, the question I didn't have a good answer for, because the truth was too complicated for a 7-year-old to understand, because pretending is what I did for 32 years, and it nearly broke me, because if I teach you to accept less than you deserve, you'll spend your whole life settling, because love shouldn't have conditions, and you shouldn't have to earn it by being quiet and small and grateful for scraps. But I couldn't say any of that. Not to a child who just wanted his grandmother to love him. "I know this is hard," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I know you're confused and angry. And you're allowed to be angry, Theo. You're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling. Then why can't I see her? Because sometimes the people who are supposed to love us don't know how to do it right. And when that happens, we have to protect ourselves. We have to make hard choices. But she's my grandma. I know. She loves me. I wanted to agree. I wanted to tell him, yes, of course she loves you. She just shows it differently. But I couldn't lie to him. Not about this. She should love you, I said carefully. And maybe, in her way, she thinks she does. But love isn't just a feeling, Theo. It's what you do. It's showing up. It's remembering what matters to people. It's making them feel seen and valued and important. His lower lip trembled. She didn't do that. No, she didn't. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the clock. Then Theo's shoulders sagged, the anger draining out of him like water from a cracked vessel. Emma said I'm a bad kid, he whispered. You're not a bad kid. Emma doesn't understand what happened, and the adults in her life are telling her things that aren't true. That's not your fault. But she's my cousin. She used to be my friend. I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. He stood there for another moment, small and lost, clutching the strap of his fallen backpack. Then, without warning, he burst into tears. Not the angry tears of before, but deep, racking sobs that shook his whole body. I came around the island and knelt beside him, and this time he didn't pull away. He collapsed against me, his face pressed into my shoulder, his small hands gripping my shirt like I was the only solid thing in a world that had turned to water. I don't understand, he sobbed. I don't understand why everything has to be so hard. I know. I don't understand either sometimes. Are you sure we're doing the right thing? The question hit me harder than I expected, because the truth was, I wasn't sure. Not completely. I was making decisions based on instinct and pain and the desperate need to protect my son from the wounds I still carried. But what if I was wrong? What if I was overreacting like they all said? What if I was the one causing damage? I held Theo tighter and said the only honest thing I could. I'm trying, sweetheart. I'm trying to do what's best for you, even when I'm not sure what that is. And I might make mistakes, but I promise you, I will never stop trying. I will never stop showing up for you. Okay? He nodded against my shoulder, still crying, still clinging. We stayed like that for a long time, two people holding each other up in a kitchen that smelled like onions and grief, while the afternoon light faded outside the window. Later that night, after Theo had finally fallen asleep, I sat on the edge of his bed and watched him breathe. He looked peaceful now, his face slack and soft, one hand curled around Captain Cosmos. But I could still see the traces of the day's pain, the redness around his eyes, the slight furrow between his brows that hadn't quite smoothed out even in sleep. I had done this to him. Not directly, maybe, but my choices had consequences, and he was bearing the weight of them. Was I doing the right thing? The question circled in my mind like a shark, finding no purchase, offering no answers. I thought about calling my mother, apologizing, finding some compromise that would let Theo see his grandmother while still protecting him from the worst of her favoritism. But every time I imagined it, I saw his face on Christmas morning. That terrible stillness, that careful, practiced bravery. No. There was no compromise that didn't require teaching my son to accept less than he deserved. And I refused to do that. I refused to let him learn the lessons I had spent my whole life trying to unlearn. But God, it was hard, harder than I had ever imagined. I kissed Theo's forehead and whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry this is happening to you. He stirred slightly but didn't wake. I left his door cracked open, the hallway light spilling across his carpet like a promise. I called Dr. Anna Webb's office the next morning. She was a child psychologist recommended by Theo's pediatrician, a woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that seemed to see everything without judging any of it. I'd resisted making the appointment for weeks, telling myself we were handling things fine, that we didn't need outside help. But after yesterday, I couldn't pretend anymore. He's struggling, I told her during our intake call, my voice cracking. And I don't know if it's because of what happened with my family, or because of how I've handled it, or I just don't know anymore. That's okay, Dr. Webb said gently. Not knowing is honest. Let's start there. Our first appointment was on a rainy Wednesday. The office smelled like lavender and old books, and there was a basket of fidget toys in the corner that Theo immediately gravitated toward. He spent the first 20 minutes building a tower out of magnetic tiles while Dr. Webb and I talked in low voices across the room. "Tell me about Christmas," she said. So I did. All of it. The 36 gifts, the panic presents, the letters, the threats, the way Theo had gone so quiet in the car, like something inside him had been bent out of shape. Dr. Webb listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in a leather-bound journal. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "And how are you doing with all of this, Elena?" The question caught me off guard. "Me? I'm fine. I'm worried about Theo." "Of course you are. But you're also a person who's navigating something incredibly difficult. You can't pour from an empty cup." "I'm not empty," I said too quickly. "I'm just focused." She smiled, gentle, knowing. "Can I tell you what I see?" I nodded. "I see a mother who's fiercely protective of her son, who's willing to burn bridges to keep him safe. That takes courage. But I also see someone who's been carrying a very heavy weight for a very long time, longer than just this Christmas." My throat tightened. "You were the overlooked child," she continued softly. "The one who learned to make herself small, to expect less, to be grateful for whatever crumbs of attention came her way. And now you're watching your son face the same treatment, and it's activating all of that old pain. This isn't about me. It's about both of you. You can't separate the two. The way you're responding to this situation is shaped by everything you experienced growing up. That doesn't mean your response is wrong, but it does mean you need to process your own wounds, not just protect Theo from his." I blinked hard, refusing to cry. "I don't have time to fall apart." "Processing isn't falling apart. It's the opposite, actually. It's how we put ourselves back together." She let the words hang in the air between us. Across the room, Theo had abandoned the magnetic tiles and was now drawing something on a small whiteboard, a rocket ship surrounded by stars. "He's resilient," Dr. Webb said, following my gaze. "More than you might realize. Children are remarkable that way, but he needs to see you being honest about hard things, not just strong through them. Does that make sense?" I nodded slowly. "Now," she said, setting down her journal, "let me spend some time with Theo alone. We'll talk again afterward." I waited in the reception area for 45 minutes, flipping through magazines without reading them, checking my phone compulsively for messages I didn't want to receive. When the door finally opened, Theo emerged with a small smile on his face. Not a big smile, not the carefree grin he'd worn before Christmas, but something genuine, something real. "Can I get a hot chocolate?" he asked. "Sure, buddy, go wait in the car. I'll be right there." He scampered off, and I turned to Dr. Webb, who was standing in the doorway with an expression I couldn't quite read. "How is he?" "He's processing a lot of complex emotions. He loves his grandmother, but he's also learned that her love comes with conditions he can't meet. That's confusing for a child. He's also very aware of your pain, Elena. He wants to protect you as much as you want to protect him." My chest ached. "I'd like to see him weekly for a while," she continued. "And I'd like you to consider some sessions for yourself as well. Not because anything is wrong with you, because healing takes time, and you deserve support too." I started to protest, but she held up a hand. "Just think about it. That's all I ask." The idea came to me on a Sunday morning in early March. Theo was lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling with the particular blankness of a child who has run out of ways to occupy himself. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, turning the world outside into a gray, waterlogged blur. "Hey," I said, sitting down beside him, "what if we did something different today?" He turned his head slightly. "Like what?" "What if we repainted your room, made it feel new, like a fresh start?" Something flickered in his eyes. Interest, maybe, or hope. "Can I pick the color?" "You can pick everything. The color, the decorations, all of it." He sat up slowly, the blankness fading from his face. "Really? Everything?" Everything. We drove to the hardware store through the rain, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm. Inside, the aisles were lined with hundreds of paint swatches, hanging like tiny paper flags in every color imaginable. Theo walked between them slowly, fingers brushing the edges, considering and rejecting with the gravity of someone making a life-altering decision. Twice he paused, twice he shook his head, then he stopped in front of a deep, rich shade of navy blue. "This one," he said, lifting the swatch carefully. "What do you like about it?" He studied it for a long moment, brow furrowed in concentration. "It looks like space, not the scary kind, the kind where you can breathe." Something softened inside me. The kind where you can breathe. "Space blue it is," I said. We added paint rollers, brushes, drop cloths, and, at Theo's insistence, a pack of glow-in-the-dark star stickers and a set of planet decals. By the time we checked out, the cart looked like we were preparing for a NASA mission. The cashier smiled down at Theo. "Big project?" "Big room," he corrected solemnly. "Big change." We spent the rest of the day transforming his space. We pushed the furniture to the center and covered it with plastic sheets. We taped off the trim with careful precision, and then, together, we began to paint. Theo dipped his brush in too much paint on the first stroke, sending a large blob splattering onto the wall. He gasped, looking at me with wide, worried eyes. "I messed up." "You didn't mess up. Painting isn't about being perfect. It's about trying." He nodded and tried again. The second stroke came out smoother. By the eighth, he was humming. We worked for hours, pausing only when our arms got tired or our fingers cramped. At some point, Theo smeared blue paint across his cheek, leaving a streak like a warrior's mark. I didn't tell him. It was too endearing to wipe off. By late afternoon, one wall was done completely. The deep navy gleamed in the fading light, rich and warm and utterly transformed. "It looks like night," Theo said, stepping back to admire it. "It does. Can we add the stars now?" "Let's wait for the paint to dry. Tomorrow, okay?" He nodded, satisfied. That night, after dinner, he fell asleep on the couch with blue paint still on his cheek and a smile on his face that I hadn't seen in months. The next day, we arranged the glow-in-the-dark stickers together. I let Theo direct the placement, watching as he created constellations across his ceiling. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper. He knew them all by name, facts he'd absorbed from library books and YouTube videos about space. "The shooting star goes here," he said, pressing a long, tailed sticker right above his bed. "For wishing." "What will you wish for?" He thought about it for a long moment. "I can't tell you. Then it won't come true." I smiled. "Fair enough." That night, after I'd tucked him in and turned off the lights, the ceiling came alive with soft green glow. Stars scattered across the navy paint like scattered diamonds, and the shooting star seemed to streak through them, frozen mid-flight. "Mom," Theo whispered. "Yeah? I like this room better than Grandma's whole house." My throat tightened. "I'm glad, sweetheart. It feels like mine," he said softly. "Really mine. It is yours. Always." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm glad we left." I leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Me too, buddy. Me too." The envelope arrived on a Monday in early April. It wasn't pastel like my mother's letters. It was white, crisp, official, bearing the embossed seal of Price and Dale Family Law Practice in the upper left corner. My name and address were printed in stark black letters, and somewhere in my chest, something cold began to spread. I knew what it was before I opened it. Some part of me had been waiting for this ever since my mother's letter had mentioned rights and lawyers and options, but knowing didn't make it easier. I sat down at the kitchen table and slid my finger under the flap. Petition for grandparent visitation rights. In the matter of the minor child, Theodore James Mitchell. The words blurred and sharpened, blurred and sharpened. I forced myself to read slowly, parsing each paragraph for meaning. My mother, listed formally as Patricia Ann Brooks, was petitioning for court-ordered visitation with Theo. The document claimed that I had unreasonably and unjustifiably restricted access to my son, causing significant emotional distress to both petitioner and child. It alleged that I was isolating the minor child from his extended family and making decisions not in the child's best interest. And then, buried in the middle of page 3, the phrase that made my blood run cold. Petitioner believes respondent is emotionally unstable and acting in ways detrimental to the child's well-being. They weren't just trying to see Theo, they were trying to undermine me as a mother. I turned to the final page where the legal requirements were listed in stark black text. Failure to respond within 30 days may result in temporary visitation rights being granted to petitioner. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. Jessica Ford answered on the second ring. She was the attorney who had processed my beneficiary changes in December, efficient, professional, and blessedly free of judgment. Elena, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. You knew about this? I got a courtesy notification this morning, standard procedure when opposing counsel files. I was going to call you this afternoon. She paused. How are you holding up? I don't know yet. I haven't finished processing. That's fair. Listen, can you come into the office tomorrow? I want to go over this in person. There's a lot to discuss. Is it bad? A pause. Then, it's manageable. Grandparent rights cases are complicated in Colorado, but they're not impossible to fight. The key is documentation, evidence of the existing relationship or lack thereof, proof that visitation wouldn't be in Theo's best interest. I have documentation, letters, screenshots, voicemails. The video from Christmas. Good. Bring everything. We'll build a case. That night, after Theo was asleep, I spread the contents of my manila folder across the dining room table. Letters, sorted by date, showing the escalation from pleading to threats. Screenshots of text messages where Danielle called me dramatic and emotionally manipulative. The crumpled receipt from my mother's panic gifts. The birthday card from 2 years ago where she'd written the wrong age, "Happy 5th birthday, Theo," when he'd been turning 6. And the video. The Christmas video that Kevin had so helpfully filmed and uploaded to the family group chat before I'd left it. 36 gifts, 3 squealing children, and 1 little boy sitting alone in the corner, hands tucked into his sleeves, waiting for someone to remember he existed. I organized everything into piles, printed backup copies, made notes in the margins. By midnight, the folder had transformed into a binder, thick, organized, and damning. The next morning, before I left for Jessica's office, my phone rang. Aunt Loretta. She was my mother's younger sister, the family member who had always seemed slightly out of step with the rest. She'd moved to Arizona 20 years ago and visited rarely, but she'd always sent Theo birthday cards with the right age and Christmas gifts that showed she'd actually paid attention to what he liked. Elena, her voice was warm and worried. I heard from your mother yesterday. She told me about the situation. Which version did she tell you? A dry laugh. Her version, of course, but I've known Patricia for 70 years. I can read between the lines. She paused. I also remember what it was like when you were little, the way she always made Danielle the center of everything. My throat tightened. You noticed? Everyone noticed, honey. Most people just didn't say anything. It wasn't our place, we told ourselves. Family business. But I've always regretted not speaking up. Another pause. Listen, Elena, if this goes to court, and it sounds like it will, I want you to know I'll testify. I'll tell the judge exactly what I've seen over the years. The favoritism, the dismissiveness, the way your mother treats Theo like an afterthought while she worships Danielle's kids. The offer hit me like a physical force. Unexpected, overwhelming. Loretta, thank you. Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You're protecting that boy in a way no one ever protected you. That takes courage. More courage than I ever had. We talked for a few more minutes about Theo, about the case, about the long and complicated history of our family. By the time we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Jessica's office was on the 3rd floor of a downtown building, all glass windows and neutral carpets. She met me in the lobby and led me to a conference room where fresh coffee and legal pads waited. Show me what you've got, she said. I handed over the binder. She flipped through it slowly, pausing occasionally to read a letter or examine a screenshot. When she reached the Christmas video, she watched the whole thing twice, her expression unreadable. "This is good," she finally said. "Better than good, actually. Most clients come to me with feelings and accusations. You've got documentation. Is it enough?" "It's a strong start." She set the binder down and leaned back in her chair. "Here's what you need to understand about grandparent visitation cases in Colorado. The law is designed to protect existing relationships. If your mother had a meaningful, ongoing bond with Theo, she'd have a stronger case. But based on what I'm seeing here, the forgotten birthdays, the favoritism, the lack of basic knowledge about who Theo is as a person, I don't think she can demonstrate that kind of relationship. So we can win? I think we can. But it won't be easy, and it won't be quick. These cases can take months to work through the court system, and your mother's attorney is going to try to paint you as the villain, the bitter daughter who's using her child as a weapon. I'm not. I know, but that's the narrative they'll push. We need to be prepared to counter it. I nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of what lay ahead. "There's one more thing," Jessica said. "Your aunt, the one who offered to testify. That's significant. A family member willing to speak against Patricia undermines the idea that you're the unreasonable one. It suggests a pattern that others have witnessed. Loretta's always been different from the rest of them. Then let's make sure her voice is heard." The months between April and September passed in a strange, suspended rhythm, life continuing its ordinary patterns while something enormous loomed on the horizon. Theo joined the science club at school. He came home every afternoon bursting with facts about black holes and neutron stars, about the temperature on Mercury and the storms on Jupiter. His teacher, Ms. Campbell, called me one evening to say he was exceptionally curious and a joy to have in class. I saved the voicemail, added it to the binder. He played baseball that summer, too. I sat in the bleachers every Saturday morning, watching him swing at pitches and miss, swing and miss, swing and, finally, connect. The ball arced into the outfield, and he ran the bases with his face split into the biggest grin I'd seen in months. I took photos, added them to the binder. Evidence of a normal life, evidence of a child thriving despite everything. But underneath the normalcy, the court date pulsed like a second heartbeat. September 14th. It appeared on my calendar in red, counting down the days until everything would be decided. 1 week before the hearing, I found something that stopped me cold. Theo had left his backpack unzipped on the kitchen table, paper spilling out, permission slips, math worksheets, a half-finished drawing of a rocket. But tucked between the pages of his spelling workbook was a single sheet of lined paper folded into quarters. I shouldn't have read it. It was clearly personal, something he'd written for himself or maybe for school. But something about the careful way it was folded made me reach for it. I unfolded it slowly. At the top, in his careful second-grade handwriting, was a title, "Who shows up below it," he had written. "My mom shows up. She makes breakfast. She comes to my games. She painted my room with stars. She reads with me every night. My grandma used to show up. She gave presents to my cousins. She took pictures of them. She forgot me on Christmas. My mom didn't forget. She never forgets." That's the difference. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. Something hot and tight pressed behind my eyes, but I refused to let it fall. Not yet. Not when there was still so much to do. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into his spelling workbook, exactly where I'd found it. He didn't need to know I'd read it, but I would carry those words with me into the courtroom, a reminder of what I was fighting for. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. What if the judge sided with my mother? What if they found me emotionally unstable, like the petition claimed? What if I lost Theo? Not permanently, but in pieces, weekend by weekend, holiday by holiday, until the distance between us grew too wide to cross. At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen. Made tea I didn't drink, stood at the window watching the streetlights flicker in the darkness. At 3 a.m., I pulled out the binder and went through it one more time. Letters, screenshots, the birthday card with the wrong age, the video. At 4 a.m., I finally allowed myself to cry. quiet, shaking sobs that I muffled with my hand so Theo wouldn't hear. At 5 a.m., I washed my face, straightened my shoulders, and started getting ready. The Silverwood County Family Courthouse was a squat brick building at the end of a long stone walkway, its columns rising against a gray September sky. The American flag hung limp in the still air, and somewhere inside, a future was about to be decided. I held Theo's hand as we walked up the steps. He was dressed in a button-up shirt that was slightly too big, the sleeves rolled once at the cuffs. His hair had that stubborn cowlick that never stayed down, no matter how much water I tried. He looked small and brave and terrified. "Mom?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Do I have to talk today?" "Only if the judge asks you questions, and you don't have to say anything you don't want to say." He nodded slowly, his grip tightening on my hand. Inside, the courthouse smelled of old paper and floor polish. Our footsteps echoed on the marble floors as we made our way to Hearing Room C. Jessica Ford was already there, seated at a long table with her binder open and her reading glasses perched on her nose. "How are you holding up?" she asked as we sat down. "I'll let you know when this is over." She smiled grimly. "Fair enough." The door on the opposite side of the room opened at exactly 9 a.m. My mother entered first. She was dressed impeccably, a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her silver hair swept into an elegant twist, her makeup subtle and dignified. She looked like someone who had never made a mistake in her life, someone who deserved sympathy. Behind her came Danielle, arms folded across her chest, jaw set in that familiar expression of righteous indignation. Kevin trailed after her like a shadow, phone already in hand, probably preparing to document their victimhood for social media. And at the rear, shuffling awkwardly with his hands shoved in his coat pockets, was my father. Raymond Brooks, 66 years old, looking everywhere except at me. I hadn't expected him to come. He'd been notably silent in the months since Christmas. No letters, no calls, no attempts at reconciliation. Just absence. His presence now felt like a betrayal I hadn't known was still possible. My mother's attorney was a man in his 50s with sharp glasses and an expensive haircut. He nodded politely at Jessica as he took his seat, the kind of professional courtesy that masked the battle about to unfold. Then the bailiff announced, "All rise." Judge Catherine Rowan entered the courtroom with the quiet authority of someone who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. She was in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a low twist, and calm, assessing eyes that seemed to take in every detail without judgment. She sat, shuffled papers, and spoke without preamble. "We are here to address the petition filed by Patricia Ann Brooks regarding visitation rights for the minor child, Theodore James Mitchell. I have reviewed the submitted materials from both parties. Let's begin with the petitioner." My mother's attorney stood. His voice was smooth, practiced, designed to inspire confidence. "Your Honor, my client has been unfairly and abruptly cut off from her grandson, a child she has loved and supported since his birth. Mrs. Brooks acknowledges that there was an oversight during the Christmas holiday, but she believes the respondent has blown this incident far out of proportion, using it as justification to sever a meaningful familial relationship." He gestured toward my mother, who dabbed at her eye with a tissue. "Mrs. Brooks simply wants what any grandmother wants, the opportunity to be part of her grandson's life. She poses no threat to the child. She seeks only to maintain the bond that existed before this unfortunate misunderstanding." Judge Rowan's expression remained neutral. "Mrs. Brooks, do you wish to add anything?" My mother stood slowly, her hand pressed to her chest as if containing her grief. "Your Honor, I love my grandson. I've always loved him. I don't understand why my daughter has chosen to punish me like this. Yes, I made a mistake at Christmas. I should have been more careful about the gifts. But does one mistake erase a lifetime of love? Does it justify cutting a grandmother off from her grandchild entirely?" Her voice cracked artfully. A single tear slid down her cheek. "I just want to see him. I just want to be part of his life. I'm begging this court to give me that chance." She sat down, and Danielle reached over to squeeze her hand. A perfect tableau of wounded maternal love. I felt sick. Jessica rose to her feet with calm, measured composure. Your Honor, before I begin my remarks, I'd like to present some evidence that I believe will provide important context for this case. She pressed a button on her laptop, and the courtroom's screen flickered to life. The Christmas video began to play. There was no sound. Jessica had muted it, but the images spoke louder than any narration could have. 36 gifts torn open in a frenzy of excitement, 3 children shrieking with joy, cameras flashing, adults laughing and clapping, and in the corner of the frame, barely visible, a small boy in a blue sweater, sitting perfectly still, hands tucked into his sleeves, face carefully, heartbreakingly blank. The video played for 2 full minutes. Nobody in the courtroom spoke. When it ended, Jessica let the silence hang for a moment before continuing. What you just witnessed, Your Honor, is Christmas morning at the petitioner's home. 36 gifts were distributed to Mrs. Brooks' other grandchildren, Emma, Tyler, and Lily Walker. Theodore Mitchell, the child at the center of this petition, received none. She placed a document on the judge's bench. This is a birthday card sent to Theodore 2 years ago. Note the message, Happy 5th birthday. Theodore was turning 6. Mrs. Brooks did not know her grandson's age. Another document. This is a receipt for gifts purchased the morning after Christmas at 8:19 a.m. following my client's departure from Mrs. Brooks' home. Emergency purchases, Your Honor. Panic gifts, not evidence of a grandmother who forgot one present, but evidence of a grandmother who didn't think of her grandson at all until confronted with the consequences. She pulled out a thick folder. And these are letters sent by Mrs. Brooks to my client over the past 8 months. They begin with pleas for reconciliation, but escalate to threats and accusations. In one letter, Mrs. Brooks writes, and I quote, If you continue down this path, you'll force me to make choices I don't want to make. In another, she states, You are not the victim here, as if acknowledging pain is somehow unreasonable. Jessica turned to face the judge directly. Your Honor, grandparent visitation rights in Colorado are designed to protect existing, meaningful relationships between grandparents and grandchildren. But what relationship exists here? Mrs. Brooks cannot remember her grandson's birthday. She cannot remember his age. She excluded him from Christmas while showering gifts on his cousins. And when confronted with these facts, her response was not remorse. It was legal action. She paused, letting the words settle. My client is not denying her son access to a loving grandmother. She is protecting him from a pattern of favoritism and neglect that has persisted for years, a pattern that Mrs. Brooks herself has documented in her own letters. Judge Rowan studied the documents for a long moment. Then she looked up. Mrs. Brooks, I have a few questions for you. My mother straightened in her seat, composing her features into an expression of cooperative grief. When is your grandson's birthday? A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. March the 15th? Incorrect. It's March 22nd. The judge made a note. And how old will Theodore be on his next birthday? He'll be 9? He's currently 8. He'll be 9 in March. My mother's face paled. Beside her, Danielle shifted uncomfortably. Judge Rowan set down her pen and studied my mother with an expression that had grown distinctly cooler. Mrs. Brooks, you've petitioned this court for visitation rights on the grounds that you have a meaningful relationship with your grandson. Yet you cannot tell me his birthday or his age. Can you tell me his favorite subject in school? Silence. His best friend's name? Silence. What he wants to be when he grows up? My mother's mouth opened and closed. Nothing came out. Judge Rowan turned to me. Ms. Mitchell, does your son wish to speak today? I looked at Theo, who had been sitting rigid beside me throughout the proceedings. His face was pale, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. But when I caught his eye, something in his expression shifted, resolved. I'd like to, Mom, he whispered, if that's okay. I squeezed his hand. It's okay, sweetheart. Just tell the truth. He stood slowly, looking impossibly small in the large, formal room. He walked to the spot Jessica indicated in front of the judge's bench and stood with his shoulders squared and his chin lifted. Judge Rowan's expression softened slightly. Hello, Theodore. You can call me Judge Rowan. I'm going to ask you a few questions, okay? Just answer honestly. There are no wrong answers. Theo nodded. Can you tell me about Christmas morning at your grandmother's house? He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was small but steady. Grandma gave presents to Emma and Tyler and Lily. Lots of presents. Big ones. They were really happy. He paused. I didn't get any presents. I sat on the floor and waited, but my name was never on the tags. I thought maybe Grandma forgot me. But then she said kids don't remember presents anyway, so it was okay. How did that make you feel? Sad, he said simply. I felt sad. And confused. I thought maybe I did something wrong. Did you do something wrong? No. His voice was firmer now. My mom said I didn't do anything wrong. She said Grandma just doesn't know how to love people the right way. I saw my mother flinch across the room. Theodore, Judge Rowan continued gently, do you want to see your grandmother? The question hung in the air. Theo was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he answered, his words were careful and precise, as if he'd been thinking about them for a very long time. My mom shows up for me. She remembers my birthday. She comes to my baseball games. She painted my room with stars. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was quieter but no less certain. My grandma gave presents to my cousins, but not to me. She didn't remember how old I was. She didn't take any pictures of me. He looked directly at Judge Rowan. My mom shows up. My grandma doesn't. That's the difference. And I don't want to see someone who doesn't show up. The courtroom was silent. My mother sat frozen, her face ashen. Danielle had stopped her performative hand squeezing, her expression shifting from righteousness to something that looked almost like doubt. Even my father had finally looked up, his eyes moving between Theo and my mother with an expression I couldn't read. Judge Rowan studied Theo for a long moment. Then she nodded. Thank you, Theodore. You can return to your seat. Theo walked back to me, and I pulled him close, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. I'm so proud of you, I whispered. Did I do okay? You were perfect. Judge Rowan shuffled her papers, then addressed the room. I've heard testimony from both parties, reviewed the submitted evidence, and spoken with the child in question. I'm prepared to render my decision. She paused, and the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Grandparent visitation rights in Colorado are not automatically granted. They require the petitioner to demonstrate an existing, meaningful relationship with the child, a relationship that serves the child's best interest. Based on the evidence presented today, I do not find that such a relationship exists. My mother made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Mrs. Brooks was unable to provide basic information about her grandson, his birthday, his age, his interests. The Christmas video demonstrates a pattern of favoritism that the petitioner has not adequately addressed or acknowledged. And most significantly, the child himself has clearly and articulately expressed his preference not to maintain contact. Judge Rowan's gaze moved to my mother. Mrs. Brooks, I don't doubt that you love your grandson in your own way, but love is not just a feeling. It's demonstrated through actions. The actions documented in this case do not support your petition. See, she picked up her gavel. The petition for grandparent visitation rights is denied. This case is dismissed with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the room like a period at the end of a sentence. The moments after the ruling blurred together in a haze of relief and exhaustion. Jessica shook my hand, her professional composure giving way to a genuine smile. You did it. He did it. Thank you, I managed. For everything. Save my number. Hopefully you won't need it again, but just in case. I gathered our things, keeping Theo close to my side. We were almost to the door when Danielle stepped into our path. Happy now? Her voice was a hiss, low enough that the bailiff wouldn't intervene, but sharp enough to draw blood. You got what you wanted. You humiliated Mom in front of a judge. You turned your own son into a weapon. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. The perfectly styled hair, the designer clothes, the righteous anger that had always been her shield, and underneath it all, the desperate need to be right, to be the favorite, to maintain the only identity she'd ever known. "I didn't turn anyone into anything," I said quietly. "Theo told the truth. That's all." "The truth?" Danielle laughed bitterly. "You coached him. You poisoned him against his own family." "No," Theo said. We both turned to look at him. His face was pale but calm, and his voice was steady. "Mom didn't coach me. She didn't tell me what to say. I said what I felt." He paused, his jaw tightening. "And you're not my family. Not really. Family shows up. Family remembers. You don't do any of that." Danielle's face went slack with shock. For a moment, she looked almost wounded, like the words had actually penetrated the armor she wore. Then her expression hardened again. "You'll regret this. Both of you." I put my hand on Theo's shoulder. "We're leaving now." We walked past her without looking back. 2 weeks later, we ran into Emma at Target. It was a Saturday afternoon. Theo and I were in the school supplies aisle, picking out notebooks for the new semester, when a small figure came hurtling toward us from the direction of the toy section. Emma, Danielle's oldest, 10 years old, her mother's daughter in miniature, stopped directly in front of Theo, her face twisted with barely contained emotion. "Why did you do it?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Why did you make Grandma cry? She cries every day because of you." Theo froze, his hand tightening on the notebook he'd been holding. "I didn't," he started. "You ruined everything." Tears were streaming down Emma's face now. "Grandma says you hate her. She says you're never coming back. Why do you hate her? What did she ever do to you?" Before I could intervene, Danielle appeared at the end of the aisle, her expression shifting from alarm to something colder when she saw me. "Emma, come here." "But Mom, he—" "Now!" Emma retreated to her mother's side, still crying, still staring at Theo with wounded incomprehension. Danielle put an arm around her daughter's shoulders, but kept her eyes on me. "See what you've done?" she said. "You're hurting children now, not just Mom. Children. Your own nephew and nieces. Danielle, save it." She pulled Emma closer. "Come on, sweetie, let's go." They disappeared around the corner, leaving Theo and me standing alone in the school supplies aisle. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A tinny version of a pop song played from the store speakers. Theo hadn't moved. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on the spot where Emma had stood. "Hey." I knelt beside him. "Are you okay?" His lower lip trembled. "Did I do something bad?" "No, sweetheart. You told the truth. That's never bad." "But Emma was crying. She thinks I hate Grandma." "Emma doesn't understand what happened. The adults in her life are telling her a story that isn't true. That's not your fault, and it's not hers either." He was quiet for a moment. Then, in a small voice, "Is she going to hate me forever?" I pulled him into a hug, right there in the middle of Target, surrounded by notebooks and pencil cases and the ordinary detritus of ordinary lives. "I don't know, buddy. I hope not. But even if she does, that's not something you can control. All you can control is being honest and being kind. That's all any of us can do." He nodded against my shoulder, but I could feel the tension in his small body. The weight of a conflict he hadn't asked for and didn't fully understand. That night, Theo had nightmares. I heard him crying at 2 a.m. and found him tangled in his sheets, tears streaming down his face, mumbling something I couldn't quite make out. When I gathered him into my arms, he clung to me like he was drowning. "They were all yelling at me," he sobbed. "Grandma and Emma and everyone. They said I was bad. They said I ruined everything." "It was just a dream, sweetheart. It wasn't real." "But what if they're right? What if I am bad?" I held him tighter, rocking gently. "You're not bad, Theo. You're one of the kindest, bravest people I've ever known. The things they said, the things they're still saying, that's about them, not about you." "I don't understand why they're so mad." "I know. It's confusing. Sometimes people get angry when they have to face uncomfortable truths. It's easier to blame someone else than to look at themselves." He was quiet for a while, his breathing slowly steadying. Then, "Mom?" "Yeah?" Winning in court doesn't mean it's over, does it? The question cut deep. 7 years old, and he already understood something that most adults refused to acknowledge. No, I admitted. It doesn't. We won the legal battle, but the emotional stuff, that takes longer. How much longer? I don't know, buddy, but we'll figure it out together. I promise. He fell back asleep eventually, still clinging to my hand. I stayed beside him until the first gray light of dawn crept through his window, watching the glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling fade as the sun rose. A month after the trial, Aunt Loretta came to visit. She arrived on a Sunday afternoon, her car loaded with Arizona souvenirs and homemade tamales that she insisted were the best you'll ever taste. She hugged Theo for a solid minute, exclaiming over how tall he'd gotten, then pressed a $20 bill into his hand and told him to buy something fun. After he'd retreated to his room to count his newfound wealth, Loretta turned to me with a more serious expression. "I need to tell you something," she said, "about your mother." We sat at the kitchen table, mugs of coffee growing cold between us, while Loretta described her visit to Patricia's house the week before. "She's not doing well, Elena." The house was a mess. Dishes in the sink, mail piled up on the table. She was still in her robe at 2 in the afternoon. "I don't think she's been taking care of herself." I felt a complicated knot form in my chest. "Is she okay? Physically, I mean?" "Physically, yes. But mentally," Loretta shook her head. "She kept saying she didn't understand what she did wrong. She kept asking why you hate her so much. It was like talking to a wall. She genuinely doesn't see it. She's always been good at not seeing things." "I know. Believe me, I know." Loretta took a sip of her cold coffee and grimaced. "But Elena, there's something else. Something I think you need to understand, even if it doesn't change anything." She set down the mug. "Your mother isn't a villain. She's not evil. She's just broken. When Danielle was sick, something inside Patricia shattered. She was convinced she was going to lose her daughter, and that fear never went away, even after Danielle recovered. She coped by clinging to Danielle, by making her the center of everything, because some part of her was always preparing for the day when Danielle might be taken from her. That doesn't excuse— No, it doesn't. I'm not saying it does." Loretta held up a hand. "What your mother did to you, what she's still doing, is wrong. The favoritism, the neglect, the way she forgot Theo on Christmas, none of that is okay, and none of it is justified by her trauma." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "But I want you to understand, your mother isn't capable of seeing what she's done. The admission would break her. It would mean acknowledging that she failed you, that she spent 30 years loving you less, that she repeated the same pattern with your son. That's too much for her to bear, so she's rewritten the story. In her version, you're the villain. You're the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family over a minor misunderstanding." I stared at my coffee, watching the surface ripple slightly from some invisible vibration. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you need to grieve, Elena. Not for the mother you lost, for the mother you never had. You've been fighting so hard to protect Theo that you haven't let yourself feel the loss of what should have been. And until you do, it's going to keep hurting." The words landed like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything I thought I understood. "I don't know how to grieve something I never had," I said quietly. Loretta reached across the table and took my hand. "You start by admitting it hurts. You let yourself be sad, not just angry, and then, slowly, you let it go, not because she deserves forgiveness, but because you deserve peace." I didn't respond, but somewhere deep inside, something shifted. A door that had been locked for 32 years creaked open, just a crack. October arrived in Silverwood like a long-held breath finally releasing. The summer heat faded, leaves transformed into brilliant shades of amber and crimson, and the air carried that particular mountain crispness that made everything feel clean and new. Theo won 3rd place at the school science fair. His project was a meticulously crafted model of the solar system, 9 planets. He insisted on including Pluto, suspended on thin wires around a glowing yellow sun. He'd spent 3 weekends painting Jupiter's swirling bands, adding shimmer to Saturn's rings, and carefully positioning each world in its proper orbit. Pluto counts, he'd told me firmly while attaching the tiny gray sphere. Just because some people decided to stop counting it doesn't mean it stopped being real. I didn't point out the metaphor. I wasn't sure he intended one, but the words stayed with me. On the day of the fair, I stood in the gymnasium surrounded by baking soda volcanoes and potato-powered clocks, watching my son explain orbital mechanics to a judge with the earnest intensity of a miniature professor. His shirt had come untucked on one side. His hair was doing that thing where it stuck up in 3 directions, and his face was glowing with the pure joy of someone who had found their passion. When they announced the winners, Theo's name came third. He collected his ribbon with a grin that could have powered his model son, then ran straight to me and threw his arms around my waist. "Did you see, Mom? Did you see?" "I saw everything, buddy. I'm so proud of you." That evening, we celebrated with pizza and ice cream, the ribbon displayed prominently on the refrigerator. Theo talked non-stop about next year's project, something involving rockets, possibly combustion, definitely requiring safety goggles. It was a good day, a normal day, the kind of day I'd almost forgotten was possible. The promotion came the following week. I hadn't been expecting it. The past year had been about survival, not achievement, showing up, doing my job, going home. But apparently, my autopilot was more competent than I'd realized. "You've earned this," my boss said, sliding the offer letter across her desk. "Your work has been exceptional, especially given everything." She didn't specify what everything meant. She didn't have to. "Senior Financial Analyst," I read aloud. The title felt strange in my mouth, like wearing someone else's clothes and discovering they fit perfectly. "Take the weekend to celebrate with Theo. You both deserve something good." That night, after Theo was asleep, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine and allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not just in my son, but in myself. In the life we were building, brick by careful brick, from the rubble of everything that had collapsed. One evening in late October, Theo and I lay on his bedroom floor, staring up at the glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling. The room was dark, except for their soft green luminescence, and the house was quiet, except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. "Mom?" His voice was soft, contemplative. "Yeah, buddy?" "I'm not mad at Grandma anymore." The words landed gently, like leaves settling on still water. I turned my head to look at him, but his eyes were fixed on the ceiling, tracing the constellations we'd created together. "How do you feel instead?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. "Sad, I think. But it's a different kind of sad than before. Not the sharp kind that makes your chest hurt. More like the kind you feel when a story ends and you wish it had gone a different way." My throat tightened. 8 years old, and he was already learning to name the textures of grief. "That's a very wise way to put it. Dr. Webb says feelings aren't like math," he continued. "They don't have to add up to just one answer. You can feel lots of things at once, and they can all be true." "Dr. Webb is pretty smart." "Yeah." He was quiet again, his small chest rising and falling steadily. Then, "Mom, do you think Grandma is sad too?" I thought about Loretta's description. The messy house, the unwashed dishes, the robe at 2 in the afternoon. The woman who genuinely couldn't understand what she'd done wrong because understanding would mean dismantling everything she believed about herself. "I think she is," I said carefully. "But her sadness is different from ours. We're sad about what happened. She's sad about the consequences without really understanding why they happened." Theo considered this. "So she's sad, but she's not really sorry?" "Something like that. That's confusing." "Yeah, buddy, it really is." He rolled onto his side to face me, his expression serious in the dim glow of the stars. "Mom, will you ever forget me? Like Grandma forgot me?" The question hit like a punch to the chest. I reached over and cupped his face in my hand, my fingers trembling slightly. "Never," I said. "Not ever. Not for a single second of a single day. You are the most important person in my entire world, Theo. and I will show up for you every single day for the rest of my life. I promise." He studied my face for a moment, searching for something. Truth, maybe, or certainty. Whatever he was looking for, he seemed to find it. "Okay," he said simply. "I believe you." But the scars were still there. Some nights, Theo still asked variations of the same question. "You won't forget my birthday, right? You'll come to my game on Saturday?" Each time I answered with the same steady certainty. Each time, something in his shoulders relaxed a little more. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was a spiral circling back to the same wounds again and again, but from slightly different angles each time. A little higher, a little lighter. We were climbing, slowly but climbing. The envelope arrived on a gray November afternoon, tucked between a credit card statement and a grocery store flyer. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately, but something about this letter was different. The envelope was plain white instead of her usual pastel stationery. There was no return address, and the script itself seemed shakier than I remembered, less the confident loops of a woman in control, and more the uncertain strokes of someone feeling their way through darkness. I didn't open it until after Theo was in bed. The letter was short, barely one page. No accusations, no manipulation, no carefully constructed guilt. Just words that read like they'd cost something to write. "Elena, I've started this letter 100 times. I've filled pages and pages, then thrown them all away. Nothing sounds right. Nothing captures what I'm trying to say. So I'll just say it simply. I was wrong. I don't fully understand how or why. I'm still trying to work that out. But I know that I hurt you. I know that I hurt Theo, and I know that the hurt didn't start at Christmas. It started long before that, maybe before you were even born. Your Aunt Loretta came to see me. She said things I didn't want to hear. She told me I've spent 30 years loving Danielle more, and I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to defend myself. But when I tried to find the words, I couldn't. Because somewhere deep down, in a place I've spent decades refusing to look, I think I've always known. I was so afraid of losing Danielle after her illness that I held on to her too tight. And in doing that, I let go of you. I told myself it was fair, that you were strong, that you didn't need me the same way she did. But that was just a lie I told myself so I could live with what I was doing. You needed me, Elena, and I wasn't there. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I've earned that, and I'm not sure I ever will. I'm just asking you to know that I see it now. Finally, too late. I see it. I'm sorry. For all of it. For the gifts I didn't give and the attention I didn't pay, and the daughter I didn't see standing right in front of me for 32 years. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. That's your choice, not mine. But I wanted you to know, whatever happens next, I loved you. I just didn't know how to show it. Patricia, not Mom, just Patricia, as if she'd finally acknowledged that she'd forfeited the right to the other name. I read the letter 3 times. The words blurred and sharpened, blurred and sharpened. Then I cried. Not angry tears, I was beyond anger now. Not frustrated tears, I was beyond frustration. These were something different, quieter, older. The tears of a wound that had finally been seen, even if it couldn't yet be healed. The tears of a little girl who had waited 32 years to hear her mother say, "I see you." I didn't call her. I didn't write back. Some things need time to settle before you know what to do with them. But I didn't throw the letter away either. I folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, next to all the others. Maybe someday I'd know what it meant. Maybe someday I'd know what to do with this small, fragile thing she'd offered. For now, it was enough to know that she'd finally looked. December came to Silverwood in a swirl of snow and twinkling lights, 1 year since the Christmas that had split my life in two. I'd braced myself for the anniversary, prepared for the memories, the comparisons, the inevitable weight of then versus now. But instead, I found myself feeling something unexpected: peace. Not the absence of pain, but its integration. The wound still there, but no longer bleeding. We were decorating our tree, a modest Douglas fir we'd picked out together, when Theo paused mid-ornament, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Mom, do you think Grandma remembers my birthday yet?" The question came out of nowhere. I nearly dropped the string of lights I was untangling. "What made you think of that?" He shrugged, carefully hanging a glass ball on a middle branch. "I've been thinking. About the letter she wrote. About what Dr. Webb said about people changing." He paused. "About whether Grandma is really sorry or just sad." I set down the lights and gave him my full attention. "And what have you decided?" "I don't know yet." He selected another ornament, a painted rocket ship. "But I was thinking, maybe there's a way to find out." "What do you mean?" He turned to face me, his expression serious. "What if we gave her a test? Not a mean test, just a chance to prove she's really different." He took a breath. "My birthday is in March. What if we told her? If she remembers, really remembers, on the right day with the right age, then I'll meet her. Just once, with you there, and Dr. Webb too." He paused, his voice dropping. "But if she forgets again, then I'll know she hasn't really changed, and I can stop hoping." I stared at my son, this small, wise person who had somehow learned to protect his own heart while still leaving a door cracked open for hope. "Theo, are you sure? You don't have to do this. You don't owe her anything." "I know." He hung the rocket ship on the tree, adjusting its position until it caught the light just right. "But Dr. Webb says forgiveness isn't really about the other person. It's about us. About not carrying heavy stuff forever." He looked at me, and in that moment, he seemed much older than 8. "I don't want to carry it forever, Mom. I want to see if I can put it down." My eyes burned. I pulled him into a hug, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling his small heart beat against my chest. "Okay," I whispered. "We'll try it. Together." That night, after Theo was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and composed a message to relay through Jessica Ford. If Patricia Brooks wishes to see Theodore, she must demonstrate genuine knowledge of who he is. On March 22nd, Theodore's 9th birthday, she may send a birthday card. If the card arrives on the correct day, addressed correctly, with the correct age, Theodore has agreed to one supervised meeting at the office of Dr. Anna Webb. This is Theodore's choice. It is also his only offer. If she forgets again, there will be no further opportunities. I sealed the envelope and set it aside to mail in the morning. Then I went to Theo's room and stood in the doorway, watching him sleep beneath his ceiling of stars. The shooting star was still there, positioned right above his head. "For wishing," he'd said. I wondered what he'd wished for. I wondered if this was it. The morning of Theo's 9th birthday dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue that felt almost too perfect to be real. I made pancakes, chocolate chip, his favorite, and we opened presents before school: a new telescope, a book about astronauts, a warm jacket he'd been eyeing for months. He was delighted, tearing into each gift with genuine joy, but I noticed the way his eyes kept drifting toward the window, toward the mailbox at the end of the driveway. "It's early," I said gently. "The mail doesn't come until afternoon." "I know." He poked at his remaining pancake. "I'm not looking for anything." We both knew he was lying, but some lies are kind, and I let this one stand. The mail came at 2:47 p.m. I heard the truck from the kitchen and walked to the mailbox slowly, my heart beating too fast. Inside, a bill, a catalog, a credit card offer, and a pale blue envelope. The handwriting on this front was shaky but unmistakable. Theodore James Mitchell. In the corner, where a return address would go. From Grandma, I carried it inside without opening it. This wasn't mine to open. "Theo," I called. "Can you come here?" He appeared instantly. He'd obviously been waiting. His eyes went to the envelope, and everything he was feeling flickered across his face. Hope, fear, and something that looked almost like bracing for impact. "It came?" "It came." I handed it to him. He held it for a long moment, just looking at it. Then, slowly, carefully, he opened it. The card had a rocket ship on the front, silver and red, soaring toward a cluster of stars. Inside, in handwriting that trembled slightly: "Dear Theo, happy 9th birthday. I hope this finds you well. I hope you're enjoying school and your science club and all the things that make you who you are. I know I haven't been a good grandmother. I know I hurt you, and I can't undo that. But I want you to know that I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to understand what I did wrong and how to be better. I've been reading about space, your favorite subject. Did you know that even black holes can release things eventually? It takes a very long time, but nothing stays trapped forever. I thought of you when I learned that. If you ever want to talk about stars or planets or anything else, I would like that. But only if you want to. Only when you're ready. I love you, Theo. I always have, even when I didn't show it right. Happy birthday. Your grandma. Below the message, taped carefully to the card, was a photograph. It was old, faded, and slightly creased. A picture of me as a child, maybe 5 or 6, sitting on my mother's lap. We were both laughing at something outside the frame. We looked happy, actually, genuinely happy. On the back, in her shaky handwriting, I knew how to love once. I'm trying to remember how. Theo stared at the card for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were bright. She remembered. She did. She got my age right. Yes. He was quiet, processing. Then, I want to see her, just once, like I said. Are you sure? He nodded slowly. I want to know if she's really changing, and I want her to know that I see her trying. He paused. Dr. Webb says that's important, letting people know when they're doing better, not just when they're doing worse. The meeting took place 3 weeks later in Dr. Webb's office. Patricia arrived first. I watched through the window as she climbed out of her car with the careful movements of someone who had aged significantly in a single year. Her hair was grayer than I remembered. Her face was more lined. She wore a simple blue dress, no jewelry except a thin gold chain, and she looked nervous in a way I'd never seen before. She looked human, fallible, small. She stood when we entered, her eyes going immediately to Theo, drinking him in like water after a long drought. Hi, Grandma, Theo said, polite and careful, but not cold. Hi, sweetheart. Her voice cracked. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Dr. Webb guided the conversation gently, creating space for words that had been dammed up for too long. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no dramatic reconciliations, no tearful embraces, no promises that everything would be perfect from now on. Patricia stumbled over her words. Theo asked questions that made her flinch. I sat quietly, watching, ready to leave if he gave the signal. But there were moments, small ones, fragile as soap bubbles, that felt like the beginning of something. Patricia asked about the science fair, and her interest seemed genuine. Theo showed her a picture of his telescope on my phone, and she listened, really listened, with an attention she'd never shown before. They talked about space, about stars, about the black holes that eventually release everything they've swallowed. At the end of the hour, Theo stood. Thank you for the card, Grandma. It meant a lot that you remembered. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. I won't forget again. I promise. I know. Theo hesitated, then added, maybe we can do this again sometime, if you want. The hope that broke across her face was almost painful to witness. I would like that, she whispered. Very much. Christmas that year was quiet. Just Theo and me in our small house, with our modest tree and our simple gifts. No drama, no performances, no one keeping score. We made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. We watched movies about space. We lay on Theo's bedroom floor and stared up at his ceiling of stars, pointing out the constellations we'd created together. Mom, he said as the evening grew late. Yeah, buddy? Is this the best Christmas ever? I thought about the question, about everything we'd lost this past year and everything we'd gained, about the grandmother who was learning to love and the mother who was learning to heal, about the long, hard road we'd walked to arrive at this small, quiet moment. I don't know if it's the best, I said honestly, but it's the most real, and I think real is worth more than perfect. Theo considered this, his face serious in the soft glow of the stars. Then he smiled. Not the careful smile of a child managing his emotions, but the genuine, unguarded smile of a child who felt completely safe. Yeah, he agreed. Real is better. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent, blanketing the world in white. The shooting star on Theo's ceiling glowed steadily above us, frozen mid-flight, still waiting for wishes. I closed my eyes and made one. Not for perfection, not for the family I'd always dreamed of. Just for this moment, this peace, this imperfect and precious life we'd built together from the wreckage of something broken. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I believed it might actually come true.